The best advice I could give is to lock down the mechanics as soon as possible, because if you're still experimenting with what the mechanics are while you're creating content, you're going to have a lot of content that isn't as on point as it was in prior iterations. You're also going to not be making content as much with the player's experience in mind, if that makes sense, because when you have a mechanic, you want to, like, at the beginning of the game, introduce them to the very basics of that mechanic and ramp up their understanding, like force them to execute their understanding of the mechanics more, better and more skillfully. And if you don't know what exactly the parameters of your mechanics are early on, that ramp is going to be really confusing.
It was kind of a challenge to explore how we wanted to approach level design because early on we already kind of had the solid mechanics and physics of the game. So it was kind of a matter of just experimenting a lot with different types of levels. You know, at one point, the levels may have looked and felt a lot more like Dust Force, and then at another point, it almost resembled like a classic 2D Sonic game because the physics essentially was so dynamic and versatile that if we wanted to make this feel more like a Sonic game from a level design perspective, we could have. And if we wanted to make this feel more like a Dust Force game from a level design perspective, we could have done that as well. Ultimately, I think we landed much more close to Dust Force than Sonic. So that took a little bit time and refinement and iterations to really kind of nail that down.
So yeah, I mean, so in terms of the design, one of the key things that we wanted to capture from games like Dust Force is the feeling of like musical playing, I guess is the best way I can describe it. So if you play an instrument, you'll understand that we are playing. There is a certain type of flow to it where you're just kind of like, you know, you're doing something and it just keeps on going forward. And that's why, you know, whenever someone plays the wrong note, it feels like really jarring. It's like, oh no, I felt really bad. A lot of these precision platformers, or just games in general, right? Death is a huge punishment for that flow, and we really didn't like that. You play a game to feel and express your sense of flow, to kind of put yourself in this almost meditative state. But when you die, you get ripped out of it, so you lose that immersion. That doesn't really feel good to us. So we wanted to, you know, create this precision platformer that focuses on this like flowing movement, as flowy as possible. It has a very strong, almost like feminine nature to it, to the game's feel, just like how vibrant and how dynamic it constantly is. And then lastly, whenever you die, you come back instantaneously, so that you never feel like you're discouraged to keep on going forward.
In terms of how intuitive you think a level is, oftentimes like it's better to be more explicit at times than assuming the player will automatically know what's going through your head, even though you've like played through a specific level and know its mechanic like to a T. The player may have like played 4 or 5 other levels that focus on completely different things.
So my approach for how to really nail down on game feel is to actually, I don't know if this is the correct response to most people, but is to be honest with myself and others. So when I'm playing a game, so imagine like popular YouTubers, how they usually do when they play games, right? They have very exaggerated emotions. They start yelling things out. The smallest thing on the screen, you would be like, "Oh yeah, fuck this shit. This shit just stopped me midway while I was flying in the air, dude. Someone needs to fucking remove this wall right now, right?" Like, it's hard to describe it with words. It's very emotional. I think perfecting emotional feel is the goal, right? I'll give you an example. You know, it could be as simple as you're playing this level. You finish designing everything. You kind of design some loops and some places that are difficult. You get through a loop, and then all of a sudden you realize that you run face plant into a wall that kind of stops you, midway on your jump, which makes sense because you had to cap the level there and keep going forward. But it just doesn't feel good, right? Like you're in the air, you're feeling really strong, and you stop right there, face plant into the wall. So what can we do to stop that? Well, it could be make the previous jump slower so that you don't fly as far. It could be lengthening the level so that you fly further, give the player a little bit more aerial movements for them to kind of glide around in the air. But ultimately, that is what we're honing in on.